There's Dean Marriott, who is the creator of the film Stolen. Dean, for the people that don't know the backstory, can you tell us how you came to that project?
Yeah, sure. So initially, the idea came from many years ago when my granddad died, and we went with my dad to his house to deal with my granddad's affairs, and we found a birth certificate, and it had my granddad's name on it, but it wasn't his date of birth. So my dad discovered at that point that he had a brother, and then realised that his brother had been given up for adoption. And that had always stayed with me, and my dad died, and he never found out about his brother. We still don't know anything to today about him. So when I decided to make my master's film last year, I thought I'll start with adoption because it was of interest. And as I started to research adoption, I found out there's a lot of irregularities around adoption. And I discovered a documentary by the BBC that looked at Spain's stolen babies, and it was by Katja Adler. And I was astonished by it because it was from 2011, but I'd never heard of it. And I spoke to a lot of people and they'd never heard of it as well. And the more I decided to look into this, the more I found out that this wasn't just something from Spain, it was international. And the whole concept of babies being stolen, I mean, in Spain it was during the Franco period, where babies were taken from their mothers when the mothers were deemed to be undeserving, or they weren't in accordance with the regime, maybe of immigrant families. And then the babies were given up for adoption to more deserving couples. And this was often facilitated by the Catholic Church and through this hospital network. So as I looked more into specific cases and specific stories, you could see that these children were being adopted all over the world. And so children would go from Spain to the States, they were being adopted by German parents, mixed nationality parents. And so the whole concept of not just adoption, but illegal adoption, and also their multilingualism, so where a baby could be taken from a Spanish-speaking couple, given to an American or American English or a German-speaking person, and then brought up in a different language so they didn't have a connection with their biological parents at all. That really appealed to me, and that's kind of where the story started.
The look of the film is the thing that I found the most striking. It looks like a product of the early 1970s. I mean, to me, it's apparent, but can you just sort of explain a little bit about why you chose that look and etc.?
I actually like the films of Almodovar, yes. So I like Spanish cinema, so you probably see in there not only the characters, the strong female characters, but also the look of it, the style of it, the texture, the feeling. And so it's not quite as extreme as Almodovar, but there was another film that was recently, it came from Spain, called Sunday's Illness, which is, again, inspired by the Almodovar look. And it's about a woman and her daughter, and the daughter was adopted, and she finds the mother, but the mother knew about the adoption. She knew that the baby existed, whereas in Stolen, the mother believed that the baby was dead. And so she was told the baby was dead and the baby was taken. But the look of this film really kind of said to me, yeah, that's exactly what I'm going for. And so with my director of photography, we sat down and we spoke about it, and we looked at the color palette to put it into the mood and the context of that period.
I just thought it was really good because it was like looking at a 1970s photograph brought to life. And I found that just really, really interesting because so many people nowadays, when they're making their film, they go straight to the, like bright and shiny. It doesn't matter what decade it's set in. So tell us a little bit more about your love of the Spanish directors. We'd like to know a little bit more about what your interests are in terms of film.
And my background actually is I trained as an actor, and so when it comes to film, I'm really influenced by theatre a lot, and so I guess that's why Almodovar appeals in a way, and the likes of Mike Leigh, but also something with a social conscience. So the work of Ken Loach, for example, with this social commentary going on. And that's the type of thing I want to try to combine in the work that I do, that there is some social awareness there. It's based on historical facts, but the story around it, the characters that I put on the screen are fictitious. The Spanish language as well, there's something about, language and character go together. And the problem I think with commercial cinema is that often films are made in English just so that they have commercial appeal. However, when you've got characters that are Spanish and they're speaking English, or they're German and they're speaking English, I don't think you get the authenticity with that character. And so that's why I have one character speaking German, one character speaking Spanish, because the language is part of them, and I think that gives them context. And the Spanish language is I don't know how to describe it, but it really is emotionally empowering, I think, for the characters. And so I can't imagine this character speaking a different language. So yeah, and I guess that attracts me to Spanish cinema and Spanish TV as well. I mean, I see Netflix has really made it easy now for people to get access to foreign language cinema and TV at home. And yeah, I think if more directors were brave enough to use the mother tongue of the character, then cinema could take on a whole new dimension instead of artificially imposing English on everyone.
How involved were you in the casting process, and how did you come across your cast?
I did the casting.
Right.
So it's funny actually when I see credits of films, because for my short, it really was. I did a lot of stuff. So I wrote, edited, directed, cast, coloured, everything. But for the casting, it was actually quite difficult because I live in Berlin, and so I was trying to find for the leading character somebody in their late 60s, early 70s, who was bilingual, mother tongue, German and Spanish. And so in the whole of Germany, there were 3 actresses.
Wow.
Yeah. And trying to interest somebody in your master's film is quite tough. Or so I thought. All of the actresses wanted to do it. So I sent the script to their agents. Are you interested? They wanted to do it. But this particular actress, Monica Kaufman, she was the one I really hoped would say yes, and she was really touched by the film. Monica comes from Argentina. She was born in Argentina of German parents, and so in Argentina as well there was a big stolen baby scandal, and so she could connect with it immediately. And she said to me, showing this from the perspective of the mother and the mother's reaction when she's confronted by the child who she believes was dead, but actually she was adopted away, is something that she's not seen before. And that's something that I wanted to approach as well, because you see lots of films where you have the child who goes to look for the parent, but not the other way around. And so for me, to cast that, I needed to have an actress that could really connect with that storyline, and also the linguistic side of it, to be able to know when the impulse existed to switch from German into Spanish and vice versa, because they do switch, but it needs to be driven emotionally. How they do it with bilingual people, they switch all the time, but what drives that? And so I did a lot of research into that. And likewise with Birgit, that played the daughter. Birgit didn't actually speak Spanish. So it was great because she's bilingual English and German. She lived in the States, and that's where her character's background is. She's adopted from Spain and taken to the States with a German mother and an American English-speaking father. And as part of the character's background, she acquired Spanish. So it was great that, as an actress, she acquired some of the Spanish, because she has to be able to understand. But like a lot of people, when they learn a language, the first thing they do, they can understand it, but they can't always speak it.
Yep.
So she had to be able to respond in German, whereas the other actress can understand the German, the other character can understand the German, but she needed to be able to show that she understood the Spanish and be able to respond to the Spanish. So it was a challenge, but yeah, they arrived, they managed to do it.
I think anything that has some connection with the Franco era is really quite fascinating. Did you know a lot about the era prior to starting the film? And if not, what are your views? And do you have any desire to make anything else that comes from that part of? And the reason
I didn't know an awful lot, to be honest. It was really the BBC documentary that pointed me in that direction. But then I realised that it's not just unique to Spain. That a lot of these dictatorships, and where I live in East Berlin, so part of the old GDR. Even there, babies were stolen, and it was actually twins that were mainly targeted in Germany, and they were taken from their less deserving, less regime-abiding parents and given to those that were towing the line, so to speak. And it's not just something of that era; it's still happening today. But in cinema and on TV, it seems that it's just the documentary filmmakers that are taking this and running with it at the moment. There's a great documentary, The Silence of Others, that's currently being screened. And it's the Almodovar brothers that produced that, actually. And that looks at all of the atrocities of the Franco era, not just the stolen babies. But I think, from my perspective, I've already got the feature version of Stolen there, so the full treatment is in place. Okay. So I am intending, hopefully, to find financial backing to be able to turn this into a feature film.
Which was leading me on to my next question. Has anyone out there got any questions for Dean? Dale?
It sparked a lot in me because I'm from Canada, and we had in the 60s what was called the 60s scoop, where they actually sold indigenous babies from indigenous families and gave them to white families. And I agree with you. Most of it has been touched by a documentary, but I haven't really seen a feature or a short about in the fictional aspect about the searches of either the parent or the lost child. And it really struck me in that aspect because I really see, I've known a lot of adoptees who have searched for the families, and I've known a lot of and I've known a lot of women who have really struggled with trying to find their children that they gave up for adoption, and I think it's very, very strong. And I agree. I don't think there's very many countries that don't have this issue in some form of matter, especially in the 60s and 50s.
Yeah, in Sweden at the moment, I've been following some of the political things going on over there, and there's a big issue with the adoptions from Chile. And so a lot of children came from Chile and were adopted in Sweden. And so now these children are mounting big legal challenges to try to get access to their documentation with regard to this adoption and the legal side of it. But trying to get that is so hard because so many things are forged.
Yeah,
and that's a big issue for them. And like in my film, for example, Soledad Solberg, the mother, she didn't actually know that her child was still alive.
Yeah.
So when there are these mothers that have been told that their baby died at birth, they can't even start the search because they have no idea that baby exists.
And it's the same thing in the 60s scoop. The children were just taken, and it wasn't a dictatorship. It was the Canadian government doing it at the time. They assumed that the indigenous peoples weren't able to take care of their own kids, so they just took them.
Yeah, it's just his judgment, isn't it?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
No, I think
it would be really nice to see a feature about that. It would be nice to see more international flavor of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the feature version of Stolen will be. It's going to be based in Argentina, the States, Germany, and Spain. So it's going to have a very much an international flavor to it. But the whole scandal, the more I look into it, I realize, it is a global epidemic, and it's current. It's still happening.
Yeah.
So, other than Stolen, have you got any other projects that you'd like to look at?
I've got so many, so many ideas. It's a long list, but at the moment, fortunately, Stolen is taking a lot of my time. It's been received really well by festivals, so I just seem to be spending every day sending, because every festival wants a different version.
Right.
They specify a DCP or a different size file, and so sending something to the festival, sending the supporting material. Actually, this evening it's being shown in Pune in India.
Wow.
So yeah, it's probably a little bit warmer than here. And then in next weekend it's in Croatia, in Zagreb, and the weekend after that is in Madrid. So that one will actually be quite an interesting one for me, because that's where this story was inspired from, and the stolen babies from the clinics in Madrid and the court cases there. So I've been in touch with quite a few different organizations in Madrid about that. So I think it'll be quite an emotional one to be there to see it on the screen in Madrid.
It's quite interesting that you're showing the film at a lot of festivals. I don't think a lot of people understand quite how expensive that can be to submit films to, like almost to the point that it's more expensive than the film that you actually made. How do you go through where you're going to send your film? What's the process behind that?
For this film, because it's, I guess, a film that's raising social issues. So I was looking at humanitarian type festivals, social issue festivals, and so specifically targeting those. As well, there's some film festivals that that if you get into, it's going to be great for your credibility and the possibility of raising finance for the film. Plus, trying to get a global diversity, because from my perspective, I thought there's no way that this film's ever going to get any funding if I can't show that it has a global appeal. And so I needed it to be accepted in festivals in different countries. So far we have 8 different countries, which I'm quite happy with. But money is an issue. For my short, we had a very small crew, so there were 6 of us. That's it. So I couldn't afford to have separate people to do the post-production, sound or colouring, editing. I did everything. So it was great for me. Unfortunately, I had the facilities to be able to do that. But you're right, the cost of the festival was about 50% of the cost of making the whole film.
Yeah.
So it's expensive, and then also to go there, it's just not possible to go to every festival. So I can't go to India. I prefer to come here anyway, because this is I'm from this area. So and then next weekend I can't go there. But fortunately, one of the guys that composed the music, Alan Spiljak, he's in Zagreb. That's where he lives, and so he's going to be attending the festival next weekend. The weekend after that, fortunately, I can go to Madrid. But we've been shown in Washington DC. There's no way I could afford to get a flight to go to Washington to see the film, as much as I'd like to do that. So yeah, it's great to have the coverage, but it's also frustrating as a short filmmaker that you can't then participate in the Q&As, for example, which for me is the important thing. The reason of making a film is to say something. And when the film says something, it's nice to be able to say something after and to justify it and to make that message heard. Because this is something that's happening. It's something that needs to stop. These stolen babies, it's horrendous.
One last question about the making, and that is that as someone that has to wear so many hats, how difficult did you find making the final cut, and how long from it's a wrap through to that's an edit did that process take?
Okay, so the film was shot in 3 days in July last year in Berlin, and last year it was really hot there. So you have contingency plans in case of rain, particularly in Europe. But there it was like we needed contingency because it was so hot. It was 34 degrees every day when we were shooting. So yeah, that was a challenge. So that was in July. I had the rough cut that was done by the middle of August, and then the final project had to be edited and ready by the end of September, because that was my MA deadline. So it was actually quite nice to have a deadline imposed by the MA. Just shortly after that, I did a little bit of extra work on the sound. So yeah, all in all, from July till middle of October, end of October, yeah, so it was quite a quick turnaround. But the planning, that was over 6 months before. Yeah, so that took quite a long time. But it wasn't too bad. Once everything was planned and everything was in place, and I had a really good team, and everyone was on board, and everyone did their share of the work. So I never really felt that, you know, I was having to do all of this stuff. Obviously, I had to be in control of it, so I was producing it and directing it. But yeah, when you've got a good team, I think it makes it a hell of a lot simpler. And it was a great team, you know, both the crew and the cast, so it was really easy to work with. Yeah, and we did have some issues. You always have issues on set.
Yep.
But you know, we all stayed calm and managed to overcome them. Yeah, it was fun.
Well, I'd just like to thank you for bringing the film to us. We really enjoyed it, and we wish you the very best for the future of it. And we hope that if you ever get to make your film, you will bring it back to us and let us see it.
I'd love to. Thank you for the invitation. It's been a
Thank
pleasure.
you ever so much. Thank you.